Starring the Warner siblings, Yakko, Wakko, and Dot, Animaniacs lives on as a reminder of how a cartoon could appeal to children without talking down to them. With that in mind, here are some things you probably didn't notice while watching Animaniacs as a kid. Perhaps the most well-known aspect of Animaniacs that is clearly meant for adult amusement is the show's proliferation of suggestive innuendo. For example, Yakko and Wakko are constantly howling at an array of busty female characters with their catchphrase.
Hello, nurse!
Dot is usually critical of her brother's over-enthusiastic libidos, though she commits her fair share of ogling as well. And these shenanigans go beyond mere cat calls and whistles. In one episode, Yakko asks Dot to dust for Prince. She dutifully does so, and when she calls for her brother's attention with legendary musician Prince in her arms, he admonishes her.
No, fingerprints.
I don't think so.
And that's not the only time the show implied something a little less innocent than a literal definition. In the episode Wakko's America, the Warners are playing Jeopardy when Wakko finds a daily double. When asked how much of his winnings he'd like to wager, he fearlessly proclaims,
I'll blow the world.
Yakko and Dot look understandably shell-shocked in response to that proclamation, though Wakko doesn't say anything else too suggestive before singing about the state capitals. Celebrity cameos are often a surefire way to give TV viewers the thrill of recognizing some of their favorite entertainers, but there were a few cameos on Animaniacs that probably went unrecognized by its pint-sized fans. One regular was the show's executive producer, Steven Spielberg. As someone who usually works behind the camera, Spielberg probably wouldn't be a face that little kids would immediately recognize, but since the show took place on the Warner Brothers lot, it makes sense for such a major filmmaking figure to occasionally appear. In the episode Chairman of the Board, a scene depicting Hollywood luminaries like Cher and Jack Nicholson seem to take its cue from the Looney Tunes short Hollywood Steps Out from way back in 1941. The chances that kids would know these celebrities are middling at best, and they surely wouldn't have picked up on the reference to old Hollywood either. Although, to be fair, that would probably be a stretch for many adults as well, unless they grew up in the 1940s themselves. Something that really sets Animaniacs apart from other cartoons is how it's completely beholden to its Hollywood setting. The Warners recreated a studio mascot of a sort and then locked in the studio lot's water tower when they became uncontrollable. Their entire existence revolves around Hollywood. However, it's a version of Hollywood that's now barely recognizable. Back when Tinseltown was still subject to the studio system of contracts and churning out films in just a few months. And the Warners weren't afraid of mocking Hollywood, the studio executives, and especially critics and journalists.
In Hollywood, they have a different language that they speak. It's spoken by those folks who went to school for just 1 week.
With a glut of celebrity cameos and a penchant for referencing older material, Animaniacs is a cinephile's dream, and it's unlikely that any kid watching back in the 90s or today would know enough about the business of Hollywood to really get these jokes. Animaniacs was filled with references to beloved classic films, including the likes of Casablanca and Star Wars, and there was one recurring segment that drew from a popular film genre. That's not exactly age-appropriate for youngsters. Impressionable kids probably shouldn't be subjected to violent mobster movies like Goodfellas or The Godfather. So while those young viewers might not appreciate how the pigeon trio known as the Goodfeathers parody these classic films, they can at least appreciate that the birds act and sound funny. But parents are likely to understand the birds' references to the classic films of Martin Scorsese and Francis Ford Coppola, especially the raspy mumbling of the God Pigeon, which spoofs Marlon Brando's whispery tones as Don Corleone. While the violence exhibited by the Goodfeathers never goes as far as stuffing a horse's head in someone's bed, they still portray the territorial tendencies typical of organized crime gangs everywhere, albeit it's in a constant hunt for food instead of making the rounds to collect insurance. Classic cinema is not Animaniacs' only go-to reference point, as the show's writers were also clearly excited to instill a love of literature in their young audience. It's unlikely that any pre-high school viewer would be familiar with the works of Shakespeare, outside of perhaps Romeo and Juliet. But that didn't stop Animaniacs from parodying the Scotland-set tragedy Macbeth. In this rendition, the three witches are played by Slappy Squirrel, Dot, and Hello Nurse, with their Shakespearean dialogue translated by Yakko.
Double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble.
Loosely translated, that means abracadabra.
While it's doubtful that this translation helps kids really understand the true essence of Macbeth, it does make for some silly gags, and when those kids grow up, they'll hopefully be more well equipped to understand the source material and appreciate the off-color interpretation. In a slightly more heartfelt tribute, Mighty Wacko at the Bat takes the classic poem Katie at the Bat and reforms it to narrate the tribulations of the Warner baseball team.
Little Wacko Warner dragged his bat up to the plate. He stood there like a tiny fixture, only 3 feet tall.
For kids, this is just a fun rhyming short, but for poetry-loving grown-ups, it's a nice little gem with a deeper meaning under the surface. That's a quality that's true of most of Animaniacs, and why it remains beloved by both the young and the young at heart. Check out one of our newest videos right here, plus even more Looper videos about your favorite shows are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.